start this.
Hi. We're here doing a thing live. It's happening right now.
Can they hear us?
They can hear and see us, Gwen.
Okay, sweet. I'm always missing that part.
How you doing?
All right.
We are joined today. Elizabeth, hello. How you doing?
Hi. I'm good. How are you guys?
Not too bad, thank you. Not too bad. Thank you for doing this.
Yeah, my pleasure.
So Gwen, you were saying you want to get because we haven't started the podcast part yet. This is the way the show now works.
This is where we usually shake out the bugs and we tell we actually do no prep. Okay. So we've been wanting to have guests for a while because guests are cool. And I'm out of shit to talk about.
True
basically. That. I'm completely, and this week was terrible, especially because there's no damn news. So this is our test case. Last night we were at the bar and Elizabeth and I was like, you should go on the podcast one time before you leave us forever. You should get on this podcast. We should talk about, I don't know, nerd shit. So we're going to talk about nerd shit today.
You're leaving and forever?
Podcast appearance.
She's dead now. She died.
Oh God.
She's gone.
That's bleak.
I know. She was one of us. She was one of the few people left in Boston using the Unreal Engine, but now
just you now, Gwen.
Yeah. Now I'm just so alone. No. Elizabeth works at Disbelief, which is
well, as of yesterday I did. Now I don't. But
yeah. Now she's heading out for something bigger and better.
Ooh. What did Disbelief do? Or still do?
Actually, we should just start the podcast.
We should just get going. Yeah. Hello everyone on Twitch. We are now going to record the podcast, so we won't be talking to you. But afterwards, at the very least, me and Gwen are going to stick around and hang out and talk with you and whatnot. So if you have any questions or whatever, please do feel free to stick around. But for now, we're just going to chat. And I think they're going to talk about engines and that. And I'm not going to know what they're saying. And a lot of my chipping in will be like, what? So enjoy that.
You're the one that makes us
I'm the
popular.
stupid one.
I'll try my best.
Yeah. We'll use the small words. We can do this. We got this.
Okay, we're in. How you doing, guys? How's it going?
Hi. It is good. Ooh, see, there's more voices this week. We have Elizabeth with us.
Hi.
So we have to work out how to do this. Yes, we're joined this week by Elizabeth. Do you want to introduce yourself? Tell everybody who you are.
Yeah. I'm. Should I say my full name or do I?
You can do it. It's, you know what? There's no rules here. You can do whatever you want.
All right. I'm Elizabeth. I'm a GPU goblin. No, I'm an engine and graphics programmer. I just did my last day at Disbelief, which is a Unreal Engine focused, engineering game studio kind of place, and but I'm headed off on a new adventure soon. But yeah, I do graphics programming primarily. I've been dumpster diving in the guts of UE4 for the past 3+ years. So
what happens is if somebody's working on a major title like Gears of War and they come close to shipping and they don't have enough engine programmers, usually for the very end of the cycle, when somebody needs to walk things through cert, and when that happens, people a lot of companies will hire Disbelief, which is a series of, or I don't know, it's like a team of engine programmers. A lot of them have worked together forever, since Midway and such. I know you're one of our newer ones at in our building. And yeah, they finish the game. They're the ninjas that make things work. So when I fuck around in Blueprint and I do dumb shit,
mm-hmm.
and somebody pays the price for that, and the person that pays the price for that at the end of the day would be people like Elizabeth. She is
brilliant. You have to put up with Gwen connecting the wrong line to the wrong box, which is, as far as I'm aware, is how that works. Like you just connect multiplayer to online, and then you've got online multiplayer. That's what I know.
Yeah, you just connect the words. There was one from last night that Elmore was talking about, like a bug where they were what was it?
They did 544 array casts. per frame. It was something insane. It was like something was moving along a spline, and they were doing 37 raycasts per segment because they needed to determine like what the next thing they had to do, and they were doing it like 10-degree increments. It was just absurd.
Oh,
and
man.
that's the kind of stuff that I see often in Blueprint. It's funny because Blueprint is a place where the designers can like just play in the sandbox and make really cool things, or like take a dump in there. I don't know. It depends on who's in there.
Depends on how much fiber you have in your diet. Like, it could be a really rough day.
Yeah.
But yeah. But I mean, but this is one of the things we talk about a lot. I love Blueprint. I love that it's this powerful, and I've worked in systems where things are way more locked down, in systems where, you know, what you have access to is like what the programmers give you access to through the API or some shit. Whereas Blueprint is an actual visual scripting language, which makes it a lot more powerful because you can do things. You can do almost anything, like anything you can come up with. But that means like one of the things you could do is do like 500 fucking raycasts a frame because you're trying to rotate a spline and you have no idea what you're doing. I can see why that might be, you know, like not ideal.
Yeah, there are a lot of performance issues that come out of blueprints, and you know it. So the thing with Blueprint is like I do think it's a good thing that it's this really powerful tool that designers who don't know how to program can just use. I mean, it's kind of a double-edged sword because then you get people doing stuff like that. But there's also problems with just like the Blueprint itself because there's kind of this weird middle layer between like content and code. So like, you know, with an art asset or something, that is content. Like we don't, generally speaking, like it's a character model. We don't need to open up like Maya or whatever and look at it to debug that content. Versus like, you know, an artist is not going to have to go looking in C++ code to fix their character. Like those are pretty well separated. Blueprint is like in this weird middle area where it's like kind of content because it's like the game script.
Well, I mean, it's still, there was always scripting languages, like Unreal before this had Unreal Script. Every engine's had something, right?
Yeah, and I think it's good to keep like game logic separate from the engine code. It's just a matter of like when you have to debug something that ends up being a Blueprint, it's weird because you end up in these situations where it's like, oh, okay, I'll just go look in the code for this thing. Why can't I find it? And then you realize you look at your call stack and you're like all these like callbacks and are like, oh shit, this is a Blueprint, isn't it? And it's just a totally different workflow to like go and open up the editor and look at it.
And then you smile because if it's in Blueprint, that means you don't have to do a fucking compile, right? Like you can just iterate quickly and fix shit quickly, and it's this beautiful.
Well,
Elizabeth, it's perfect.
That depends. If you're working on PC, yeah, it's, you know, if you're in an editor build, sure. If you're not doing an editor build, like say you're working on, you know, a console title or you need to debug something in like a cooked build, if you change something in Blueprint, you have to cook. And that you have no idea what's, you know, what your cook times are going to be like because.
Yeah, but I mean, how often, even, don't get me wrong, we would cook a lot. I guess this is something you have to do more. Content people don't usually have to worry about that because usually you just get everything working at PC and then other people figure it out for the console. So, okay, yeah, all right, fair. All right, I didn't consider that. That is a pain in the ass that you have to cook every time you do a build for console.
What does cooking mean?
I guess
just out of interest.
Oh, sorry, what were you going to say?
What does cooking mean, just out of interest? I was kind of following you until cooking. Just as concessions.
It's basically, so you have like raw content, right? And it's in, you know, the art format or whatever.
Yeah.
So you have to kind of cook it into a format that's like compressed and ready to go on the console.
like rendering it or mixing it down if you're doing audio or whatever into one thing.
Or yeah, like video rendering.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, kind of like that.
Perfect.
A way I used to explain it to people is, you know how when you save off a word, you open a Word file and you see words, but when you save it off, if you were to right-click that Word file and open it in Notepad, you see...
It's madness. Yeah.
Madness. Sure.
Yeah.
Think of it like that. It's that process. Taking something that's human-readable and making it something machine-readable.
Perfect.
Which is fast.
And
yeah, that, in a nutshell, yeah, that's what it is.
Awesome. Sorry, I will occasionally interject with things I just don't understand. Please carry on.
Please do, because
because we'll just be Yeah.
This is the first time we've spoken, Elizabeth. My background is definitely more in the talking about video games. In fact, it is 100% in the talking about video games realm than it is making. So the last 2 years of this podcast has almost been me and Gwen, or Gwen slowly explaining to me how video game development works. So that's another.
Yeah. This day is going to be real. This is going to be real deep in the nerd shit. I feel bad.
Yeah.
I warned you.
You did.
I warned you that this day. Yeah. Yeah. But it's fun for me.
No, yeah, please get back to it. You were talking about the cooking and the consoles and the whatnot.
Sure. Okay, so I didn't consider that one of the problems with Blueprint is cooking a console, that being a pain in the ass. That is true. I will say most people say that working in Blueprint is a lot faster than working in code because you don't have to compile. So when you're not working on consoles, it's way faster to iterate, right?
It depends. So like it's definitely faster if you're iterating on a design. Like that totally makes sense. You just play an editor or whatever. But the thing is, when you're a programmer, like, do you know about the different types of builds? Because there are a lot of different types of builds you can have in
shipping.
Unreal. Yeah, like shipping, development, tests, like all that sort of stuff.
We should break it down for Chris.
Let me. Okay,
Thanks.
So there are various types of build configurations when you're like building a game so that you can actually like run the code. So there's at the most like, I guess, cleaned up for shipping the actual game is the shipping build, and that takes I guess that takes the longest. It's, you know, you have no debug output, there's no logging, there's, you know, it's just what you put on the disk to ship out to actual customers. And then below that there's the test build, and that has very minimal logging, and that's like almost shipping, and that's basically when you're towards the end of your development cycle, you use the test build to do profiling and like get the last few milliseconds, you know, so you can hit your frame rate. Then below that, and this is usually where we're working, is the development build. So some stuff is optimized away, but you know, you have all like the vast majority of your logging works. You can put breakpoints wherever, and you can, like, you know, just look at what's going on in the code. And then below that, there's the debug build, which in my experience I've almost never used, and that's like a very, you know, there's tons of debug info. All of your, there's like different levels of, you know, asserts, which are things like you can put a thing called it's called a check in Unreal. You can say like, I want to check if this statement is true, like this object is not null, and if it doesn't work, it'll look like it'll crash if you don't have a debugger broken in, but it's like, oh, this check failed, we need to fix this, basically.
Yeah.
So
wait, are you talking about like warnings and shit, or are you talking about like something in
I'm talking like, so for you, like if you were in the editor, if you hit a check, it would look like a crash. But it's not actually like a hard crash, because there's different kinds of crashes. So if you put, it's an assert. It's basically like you as a programmer are telling yourself basically, something is fucked up. We need to stop execution right now to debug this because this should not work. Versus like if you get a crash where it's like, oh, we're trying to read 0 because something is null, like that is a lot worse because you don't know where that's coming from. At any rate, yeah. So back to, I guess, what I was saying about cooking. So most of the time you're working in a development build. All of these builds also have like editor components. So you can have a development build or you can have a development editor build. You can't run an editor build on a dev kit. So if I'm working on PS4, like I can't use, you know, I can't just like do something in Blueprint and then run it on the PS4. Like I have to cook it because I have to run a development build.
Yeah, your life sounds like hell, actually. Like I hated fucking cooking. We had to do that. We did it at the end of BioShock Infinite. That was the only time I worked on a console game. Oh, that's not true. Obviously, the Flame and the Flood was on console, but we had a curve handle to port to PS4, and cooking to like building for the Xbox. I did nothing for that. That was like entirely Damian. It's like I've had to cook a couple times. I just hate it. I hate getting a dev kit, the like 4-hour experience that is setting up a fucking dev kit. I mean, I'm not like it's fun if you do it. I imagine because you have to work in that stuff every day, it's fine. But like if you have to set up a dev kit once every 2 years, it's like this thing I dread. And I know maybe I'm not the most technical fucking person, but like I'm not.
Setting up dev kits is a pain in the ass because I've been, you always have to like, flash the dev kit, get the latest SDK, and then set up your environment. And all that is a pain in the ass. Like we hate doing that too. And the documentation for it is usually crap. So it's like, I don't know why this isn't building. Oh, your SDK isn't right. Oh, well, how do I get that onto the dev kit?
Yeah.
Figure it out.
Oh,
Sounds
God.
fun.
Yeah.
That's great. It's a fucking blasty blast. Yeah, I forgot about all that stuff with consoles. All of that, walking something through cert, oh god. Yeah, whatever.
Like, it's funny because like consoles on the whole have much better tools. Like you put a lot more investment in setting them up, but then you have tools that can tell you like way more information than you can get on PC tools. So I was working on a project for like a year and a half or something where it was a PC game type thing, and we had really weird hardware with like multiple GPUs, and because of the like GPU and hardware configuration, like none of the tools worked. So if I wanted to debug like a graphics issue, like my favorite thing in the world is corruptions. I love them. But
That's
debugging
good.
them
I like bananas.
sucks. Huh?
So I like fruit personally. My favorite thing in the world. Maybe like, I don't know, a nice piece of chocolate.
Let me qualify that. My favorite bugs to debug are graphics corruptions.
How come?
Because they're cool.
Right? I was just thinking that. I was like, I hope the reason is because they look really cool, which they do.
Oh, yeah. They super do. Like, have you guys played Pokemon?
Yeah. Hell yeah. Missing now. Yeah, that thing's cool as hell.
Yeah, Missing Now is the world's most beloved corruption.
Yeah, that thing looks amazing. Yeah. Just finding that terrifying looking like bit of static. It's like, oh shit.
Yeah. That's the kind of stuff I love.
That's true. People love the weird art bugs. Anything with the skeletal system that gets messed up.
Oh god,
like,
yeah.
That's the best.
The thing is, like, I'm not like you. I've reached a point now where I've seen it all, and so when I see one of those on Twitter or something, they're like, "Oh, what happened here?" Haha, and I'm like, "Here's exactly what happened. Fix your shit." Like, it's just you applied an additive, you put a normal animation into an additive. It's not funny. It's like a 2-second fix.
I know, man. It's pretty funny when people in video games, like their character models, just start freaking out. That is quite humorous. Like I was just playing Vampire. And there was a woman during a really serious little speech between me and this woman who was providing free healthcare to the poor people of this district of London, and where she's been in league with some evil people, and we're talking all through that. The cloth model for her dress in her lap is just going crazy and looking like she's got a cat under her dress. It's just freaking out, and it's just like, God. This is brilliant. This is the best thing that could be happening right now.
Dude, was it like ragdoll or was it like dynamic cloth?
It seemed like it was just the cloth. She wasn't moving at all. It wasn't like her body. It was just the cloth specifically just like on her skirt, and it was just freaking out. And I was like, this is brilliant. I'm a big fan of this. Or at the very beginning of the game, someone was running towards me. He was like, "Die, you monster!" And then after he delivered the line, "Die, you monster," he just went into a T-pose and then fell over. I was like, this is brilliant.
T-pose ballet, man, that's the shit.
Yeah, I was a big fan.
Somebody's dying though, like somebody's just fucking dying because that happened.
Yeah, it wasn't ideal, I guess, but it was pretty funny. Like I was streaming it at the time.
Where's the line? Like that's funny, but what happened to with BioWare is not funny. I guess it's consistency, huh?
Yeah, this happened once. Like,
yeah, okay, fair.
But they are funny. And I guess because we talked about the whole thing with Mass Effect Andromeda, and that was kind of a different... It wasn't just like a humorous little glitch. People seemed angry at like just the way everything looked and moved and whatnot. But anyway, so finding glitches and whatnot, specifically graphical ones, can be a lot of fun, it seems.
Yeah, I mean, granted, I'm like kind of a weirdo, but I mean, you telling that story, I'm like, damn, I want to get like a render dot capture and figure out what's going on.
Oh, like why it did it?
Yeah, I really like finding out why, because it always ends up being something really small in my experience. Like, one of my favorite bugs to talk about is I worked on a console game, like when I first started Disbelief, and in the Xbox build of the game, there was this like rainbow missing no garbage reflection, and I was like, "What the hell is this?" This was one of the first. I don't know if it was one of the first. It was one of the bugs I got assigned, and it was on Xbox, so I had console tools, which are like by far and away like much more powerful than the PC tools, just because you know exactly what hardware you have.
Yeah.
At any rate, so I was looking in the capture, and like I stepped all the way down to the beginning of the frame, and I was like, "This looks fine. This is not getting fucked up at runtime. What is going on?" So I traced this bug all the way back to the cooker, and what it ended up being was so reflections, like at least in this game, are like the cube maps, right? So it's a particular format of texture. So in the cooker, it was trying to write out this block compressed cube map linearly, which it's kind of like when we were talking before, if you try to right click a file and open it in Notepad, it'll look like garbage.
Yeah.
Because like it's text, but not really.
Yeah.
So what the problem was in the cooker, there was some warning because when cooking for Xbox, the texture format that it was like saving out for the Xbox was throwing this warning like, oh, this is not supported on the GPU for the PC, which like obviously it's for the Xbox, the hardware is different. So instead of doing the right fix, which would have been, which I ended up doing, was just ignore that and save it out in the correct texture, just not for the GPU because you're not using that texture anyway. They were like, oh, well, I guess we'll just make it linear because I guess that was what the D3D debug guideline was. So like, oh, just save this as linear because that's supported. It's fine, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the kind of stuff. I mean, that's like a pretty typical, I guess, graphics bug that I would see.
You have, how do I put this? Like, I barely followed that. You actually lost me for a bit there. Like, is it? No, it's okay. Like, do you have like? I know everybody from Disbelief hangs out a lot, but is it? It's exciting to talk about this stuff, right? Like when you figure out a bug, it's like you've cracked a code. It's like you solved a puzzle or something, and it's something that people only understand if they also kind of do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Like, I mean, I guess this is like the kind of bug that we saw at Disbelief all the time. And actually, like one of the last bugs that I fixed on my last day was kind of that sort of thing where you get this like really fucked up error or crash or whatever, and then ends up being like a one-line fix.
Yeah.
It's a really small detail that has this massive cascading effect.
But I guess what I was about to get into there is what's interesting to me is that like I think when you work at a small studio somewhere where everybody is the only one who has their discipline, who's of their discipline, like imagine if you were the only graphics programmer on a team. And you spent like 2 days, however long it took to find that, right? And you figured it out. Like, does it suck if you have no one to talk to? Does it suck if there's like, because like you can't go to the artists and be like, hey, I figured out, you did this, but you should have done that. And I'll tell you, like as a tech artist, or like right now, I'm the only animator on my team. Part of the reason why I'm like online so much and I became so involved with the different animation communities and things is because nobody knows what the fuck I do each day. Like if I come up with some rigging thing, like if I invent something and I don't make a YouTube video of it or anything, I can know that I'm the shit, but like I can't bounce ideas off of people and I can't like brag about it because nobody has any idea what the hell I'm talking about most of the time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I think Disbelief's cool because you guys are all you're all graphics programmers or low level engine programmers, so you kind of all get it, right?
I mean, we're not all graphics programmers, so like, there's limits to like whether people know like in specific domain knowledge, but I think there's enough like of the kind of thinking that we do where if you don't have the background knowledge, like it's kind of fine. I also think that like given enough time or like the right tools to explain it to someone who has like some technical ability, like I feel like if I had a little more time and like a whiteboard or something, I could explain like the
think
bug I just explained, and it would make sense.
You could, but it wouldn't be as like, it's like how if you have to explain the joke's not funny. Like if you
That's
have
my
to,
life.
what I'm saying is like nobody, if you have to break down something, you're like, I solved this really hard problem. I had this really hard problem and I figured it out, and here was the solution. And somebody else understands that, and they can kind of relate. They can go, oh shit, that's cool. Whereas if you have to explain literally every little part and why that, I just feel like it loses some impact. I feel like you actually have one of those professions that is so niche that if you didn't have people around you who were like that, I think that would suck. I guess that's all I'm trying to say. As somebody, like I've worked at a large studio and I worked at a studio. Like I don't know, have you ever been the only graphics programmer on a team, or have you ever been in a small team?
I mean, Disbelief is probably the smallest team I've been on.
Yeah, but you guys are you're all engine programmers, right?
Yeah.
So that's like, I know there's subdomains within there, but you guys kind of understand what each other, like what everybody else does, right?
Yeah, I mean, there are times where like, because my background is so graphics heavy and like rendering heavy specifically, there have been times where I'd be like, oh, this effect is fucked up. Like I have a little bit of an art background too, and I remember it was early on, it was on the same game. I was like, this effect is all fucked up, and Steve was like, oh wow, I didn't even notice that.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, our knowledge domains don't overlap completely. It is nice that like it is nice that we can talk about like, oh, it's really hard bug, and there's that like mutual understanding. But there are some things where it's like specific hardware related or whatever. Where, like I have some internet friends, like other game industry programmer friends on the internet. I'm like, look at this fucked up graphics thing, and they like understand more than like some people at Disbelief might understand, I guess.
Yeah, that's actually interesting. So you still have like other communities you reach out to for this kind of stuff?
Oh yeah. I mean, game dev Twitter is like,
oh, the people you follow on Twitter and stuff. Yeah. Groovy.
Yeah.
Sweet. Let me think. I want this podcast to be successful, and you're no longer working in Unreal, so tell me everything. You're free. Let it out. Everything from the bar. What's I give you permission to bitch about Unreal.
All right, I was gonna say, I was like, what the fuck do you want to know? Like, tell me the secrets. I was like, what?
No, it's
bitch about Unreal. You fucking love Unreal, Gwen. It's like your favorite thing.
Oh, it is actually. Yes, this is something we talk about a lot. I think that's actually why we decided to do this podcast, because I'm like the lone person that likes Unreal. I go to the bar and
just you.
Like, well,
oh no, Gwen, I mean, you're that person.
I'm
you're Windows Phone person.
Yeah. No, Unreal is perfect in every way, but like I'm in a building, like there's two companies in my building, right? Like there's the Molasses Flood, and like I'm the only one that drinks there. And so I go to the bar with Disbelief, which is all engine programmers who their job is to clean up everybody else's bullshit in Unreal every day. So yeah, I get a lot of dirt on things like Slate, or I don't know how much we're allowed to talk about still. So
I don't even know what Slate is, so you feel free.
Things. I've seen some shit.
Oh damn!
There it is.
I mean, so
don't incriminate yourself in any way.
No,
this is my advice as a professional interviewer. That is my advice. As exciting as Gwen may find it, other people will see and hear this.
No, I mean, every engine is flawed in its own way, right? Like, and at some point, I'm gonna end up using Unity more, and it'll be interesting to compare and contrast. But right now, my experience is like down in the guts of Unreal, and like all that stuff is fresh in my mind. I couldn't tell you like what the worst part of Unreal is, but I certainly have like stories about bad things that I've seen in Unreal, because it's such a massive engine. So parts of it are going to be a massive clusterfuck.
Yeah.
Is this just because it's like something that's been built on top of something into forever, and so there's bits of it that are just like it works, never touch it, like kind of a situation?
I have found and fixed bugs that are from I was still in high school at the time.
Damn.
Like I fixed a bug that was from 2003.
You
Like,
have yeah, but I mean, in their defense, like you can't. My counter argument would be it's not trivial to update some of that lower level stuff. You can't just go fucking
true.
library
Some
when
of that was just really bad code from the get-go, and someone like that should never have been checked in. So the bug I'm thinking of specifically, it was this non-uniform scaling bug. So it was something in the editor. I don't remember exactly what it was, but instead of like passing in XYZ coordinates to scale something in, you know, the proper three-dimensional directions, it was just like, oh, we'll just use X. It's fine.
Mhm.
Like, no? When is that ever fine in 3D?
Just one
Like-
plane. Like, that'll do.
Yeah.
Like, sure, the X and Y dimensions will always be the same as
There was
Z, or
there was a bug similar to that at Irrational that it's fixed in UE4. It was in UE3, and I basically the TLDR is this: like we Anakini changed 3 lines of code, and we came in the next day, and our animations took up half as much space, like in memory, half.
Mhm.
Like he just literally changed 3 fucking lines of code, from what I understand. It was something that was like he uncommented something or some shit, and then it was like magic. But I mean, the other side of this, to be fair, is once you Unreal is being used by a large number of studios, and it's if they fuck with something that's super low level in the middle of a version, like I'm sure with UE5 they can rewrite the guts of the engine, right? But they can't do that now when they have clients that are counting on them and updating stuff. You know what I mean?
I mean, it depends on the bug, right? Because they're like certainly with movement bugs that have been there forever since like UE2 probably. Like that, I could see why they wouldn't want to fuck with that. But
I haven't heard anybody complaining. Oh wait, yeah, I have.
there are some really old bugs. Like you would not believe some shit that has been hanging around for like 10 plus years.
Just in the in like pathfinding. What do you mean by movement?
Oh no, like actual like controls, like input movement controls. I think it was like and actually I heard Unity had the same problem where it was like the matrix multiplication was in the wrong order. So you had to like do the math wrong basically to have the movement come out correctly.
Okay.
It was one of those like, you know, honest mistakes, but it should have been caught a long time ago. And now that, you know, it really needs to be fixed, everyone's depending on that bug being there.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a leaning tower of Pisa, right? So it's
This
like
is
it's
what I
started
was
to lean
talking
over, and now
about.
people build this way.
Yeah, if you
direction.
the thing is if you're building on this foundation, you can't change the foundation. You have to stop shaking the jello at some point. So like I'm sure they'll like with UE5 they'll maybe fix that. But I mean if you can't fucks with something so foundational that you destroy what your clients are doing. That's the way I imagine it.
I mean, that's kind of why people hire Disbelief is like, well, there's a
Can you
lot of
fix-
stuff here that we can start with, but we want to fix this, and this, and add all this other functionality that we don't have the engine programming people for. So like the project I was working on with like the multiple GPUs, like we had to make Unreal work for multiple GPUs, and it was just we had to like totally rewrite like the rendering hardware interface level to support that. It was interesting. It was wild, but it was like Unreal was never meant to be used this way, so I guess we have to do it ourselves.
Yeah. Do you end up like fixing a lot of the same bugs between projects?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's
Interesting.
I mean the common theme in like probably every game I've ever worked on. I might not have worked on this myself, but there's always like level streaming. That's like a constant thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
What is that?
No comment.
Oh.
Level streaming is a way to, it's basically like, so you have all your, you know, assets and content on disk, right? And you need to have it be loading in to memory fast enough so that when you're like walking through a door or something, there's a level there when you get there.
Yeah.
So you've probably seen this in a lot of games because one of the very visible problems with level streaming that you always have to fix on Unreal games, or really probably any game, is texture streaming. So you see like texture pop in
Yes.
as the like MIPS are streaming in, so you see like low res textures, and that kind of gets better.
That get nicer as you turn around and you have that second of like, oh, there you go. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think a way I explain it to people is like when you have a big game, you don't have the entire world at any given time because the computer can't handle having the entire world there for you to see and experience at any given time.
Yeah.
You pull in bits of it, right? You stream in bits of it, and the way you stream is different from game to game. But I don't know. Elizabeth probably actually explained it perfectly fine. I don't know why I'm reiterating it.
Yeah, no, I mean that's a really, in a nutshell, yeah. You have like your game disk is going to hold a lot more than your system memory, and you simply cannot fit the entire game in system memory at one time. So you take bits and pieces out as you need them.
Mm-hmm. And then you have to determine like which parts to get in and out and so forth.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the what's the telltale sign of an Unreal game is you hit a load screen and you have a spinner, and then the spinner like stops for a second. If you ever see that, you know that game was made in Unreal. That's like one of the jokes in the industry.
Yeah.
We fixed that, I think. I don't know how. Damian worked some kind of magic.
I'm pretty sure Elmore's fixed that bug on a project I worked on.
Oh, that was just like a bug? Just the loading wheel being broken was just a bug?
Well, so some things are like small bugs and some things are just like design issues. So I don't know the details because I haven't actually worked on this myself, but something about like UI videos or loading screens that has like a different ticking frequency or like a different ticking thread, and you can't tick it at the same time as like the level streaming. It's something really ridiculous. Like you can't tick a loading movie. Like you can't hide a load with it, basically, is the crux of it. And it's like that's the point though.
Yeah.
You're supposed to use the movie to hide your load.
To hide the loading.
You can't do it. What are we?
Yeah. Isn't there like I think at Irrational we covered them with a bank, right? Or oh shit, sorry, you weren't at Irrational.
Nope.
I'm trying to remember.
You just assume everyone was at this stage. So like we all were, right?
Everybody. Yeah. And unfortunately everybody's left Boston, and now Elizabeth is leaving Boston and the Unreal Engine because she's terrible.
Oh.
We will miss you, Elizabeth.
I'm sorry I defected.
You did, you defected. We hate you now. It's not okay.
Please find it in your heart to forgive me.
We won't. You're dead. So
she's such a nice person, Gwen, isn't she? She's full of love and joy.
She's the enemy. We need to do one of these in like 6 months when you've worked in the Gods of Unity, and then you're filled with like the rage and wrath towards Unity, and then then we'll like let go. Then we'll get the real deep like which one's actually good. Because I feel like if your job every day is to clean up other people's mess in
so that's what you did. Like I don't know if we definitely established what the company you worked for actually did. It just
so Disbelief, like we're basically I don't work there now, but basically what Disbelief does is we're like I guess contracts. Like we do contracts for companies. So like sometimes we're like towards the end of ship, and sometimes we come on for the full development cycle of the game. Sometimes we're there like from pre-production to the end. Like the last project I was on, the multi-GPU thing. I mean, and we had to, I think we were basically on there for pre-production until like some people are still on that project. I ended up moving to a different one, but yeah. So it depends on what the customer is, right? So like we're basically contracts for hire. So, but we're not like individual contractors. It's like, okay, we'll give you a team of engine programmers. Like, what do you need?
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So are you familiar with the idea of like ninjas in the industry, Chris? Like if you're doing something bleeding edge for a new platform, say you're doing something for Microsoft's new console that they're doing, and Microsoft needs your stuff to look good, they'll send you like they'll have people on staff that are experts. They drop in, they parachute in. They're called like ninjas.
Oh,
There's
okay.
a couple of those.
I thought we were just, I was like, you're revealing ninjas still exist and trained in the art of ninjutsu and they kill people.
Ops.
Yeah, it's like, oh
Special
shit.
ops.
Yeah.
So-
Okay, so you're specific, like with the Unreal Engine, you guys are like, we fucking know this shit. If you're making a game with this, you come to us and we fix your shit right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Gotcha.
that's pretty much exactly what this belief is about.
Nice. Can you talk about specific projects you've worked on? Like what's the coolest stuff you've worked on? See, I asked the hard-hitting, in-depth questions. What's your favorite thing? Well, that's why I'm a pro.
I don't know how much you can say it's announced. That's the problem.
Is it
I can
all,
talk
like, has
about-
anything
I
come
worked on
out?
Gears of War 4. I can talk
Ooh.
about that a bit.
Nice.
Yeah, that was pretty cool.
Yeah?
I got to work on. So I worked on the Xbox version, and I worked on the Windows like UWP port after a little bit. And the biggest thing that I worked on that project, I kind of did a bunch of different stuff, but I did a lot of work on the GPU particle systems.
Ooh.
So, do you know what particle systems are and like what they do?
Vaguely. I believe
Okay.
they are systems for the creation of particles.
Yeah, so like if you see smoke or fire, rain, anything that's kind of like an amorphous effect, those are particles. So
Cool.
Unreal has CPU particles, which are, you can't make as many of them, but you have more control because they're run on the CPU.
Yeah.
And then they have GPU particles, which are a little bit more restrictive in terms of what they can do, but you can make way more particles with it because it's all like packed into a texture that you just send to the GPU and simulate there.
Oh.
So one of the things I worked on for that project was there were a bunch of features that the artists wanted that were in CPU particles but did not exist in GPU particles. And I had to
So fucking
do
cliche
some
for
pretty
Gears
wacky
of War.
shit to make that work. Yeah.
That's the definition of Gears of War.
Is
Sparks.
it? Oh,
Yeah.
Sparks.
Fire,
Okay.
rain.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed that game. That game was fun. I liked it.
Yeah.
But then I liked all the other Gears of War, except that random one that had nothing to do with what was that one that had nothing to do with the actual main storyline and was just remembering things? It doesn't matter. It was on the Xbox 360. Yeah, no, that game was a lot of fun. And yeah, there's loads of sparks and smoke and all sorts of shit in that game.
Rain, blood. That was actually one of my favorite bugs from that project was I was working on getting wind to work right with something, and I had this bug that was like blood puffs off in the wind. So like if a character got shot, you would see like a smoke trail, but what it actually was blood just puffing off in the wind.
Puffing away into the wind.
Yeah, 'cause that's how blood works.
Yeah, it's basically a smoke.
Maybe.
If you
you're
shoot someone
underwater.
good enough, that's how it works. I remember though, that was the first, I think that was the first actual E3 I attended that I got to go to the press conferences. And I remember watching the Gears of War 4, like the bit that sticks in my mind is actually involves wind, because the first time they showed off that game, it involved a giant storm and like stuff flying everywhere, and it was like, wow, that was really cool. So I specifically remember things relating to wind in Gears of War 4, weirdly enough.
Yeah, I worked on that system a bit. It was fun.
Nice.
Another big thing I do on this, well, I guess a lot, like one of the big things that this belief does in general, but a lot of the time I spent towards the end of that project was like on performance optimization. So like I talked a lot about like debugging and fixing stuff, but one of the things that Gwen mentioned earlier was like change 3 lines of code and suddenly your animations take up half as much space or something.
That's not, you don't get those every day.
No,
those
you
are those
don't.
rare wins. Yeah.
No.
Usually Chris, what they get is like they'll go and they'll, you have an idea of what like frame rate is, right?
Yes.
Like how many FPS a game is.
Yeah, very important.
Okay, cool. All right,
1080 60 plus.
So what they can
That's
do
what we
is
all
they can
want on the
pull up a
internet.
frame and they can look at how much time that frame is taking and what is taking that frame so long. And they kind of drill down into that, right?
As in just the appearance of the frame in relation to when people are seeing the frame, which are we talking like dropped frames or
when the computer
How many
starts
per
saying
second?
draw the frame until the frame is drawn.
Gotcha.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Elizabeth, because I could be. But like,
Yeah.
there's different parts of that, right? That happen.
Yeah, it's kind of like from the moment you start building everything to make that frame until you actually draw it. So there's a lot of different things that go into making a single frame of the game, and it's not just rendering code, but all of that. So usually, people talk about frame rates, but when we're doing profiling and stuff, we're more often than not talking about milliseconds. Like, how many milliseconds does it take to simulate wind, or how many milliseconds does it take to draw the shadows?
I think this is what I was saying at the bar last night, is because a lot of the complaints about whether or not Blueprint is slow, I think in my mind is kind of missing the point, because at the end of the day, the thing that takes the longest is drawing the frame, right? Like, Blueprint is slow if you do very dumb shit, like a million fucking raycasts or something like that. But on the whole, like, the thing that makes games that has the reason you have low FPS is usually your rendering code, right? In your experience as an expert?
I mean, not necessarily. It depends. And like, anything can be fucking up your performance, really. There's like, frame rate is not just about the rendering. I don't know if you've heard the terms like CPU bound and GPU bound.
Yeah.
So it could be you're taking the most time, just raw milliseconds. Like, if you have 16 milliseconds to do everything you need, from getting your input, updating your character positions, simulating all your physics, drawing it, and then putting it on the screen, if you want to hit 60 frames per second.
Sure.
So it could be that your physics simulation is, taking, 10 milliseconds because some moron decided that it was a good idea to put physics objects on, like, oh, suddenly your rocks that should be static or not physics objects are like dynamic.
But I guess my theory, what the argument I would make is that even that, like, what you're still saying is that it's content. The reason why you have low FPS is usually content, right?
I mean, again, not necessarily. So, like, a lot of the times, yeah, there can be content, but sometimes, I mean, oftentimes, just as it's hard to say, like, it's 50-50 or not, but I've seen egregious performance issues both from content and code. So before I
people are doing dumb oh, sorry.
Yeah, people, I mean, sometimes people are doing dumb shit because they're being dumb, and sometimes people are doing dumb shit because, like, they had to, or because the documentation's bad and they didn't know any better. I mean, people are not usually trying to do dumb shit.
Oh, I'm leaning hard into it, man. I just want to shoot the moon.
So yeah, I mean, there's a grain of, like, you should know better. Like, for example, you shouldn't put 4K textures on a box that's going to be, 20 meters away.
Probably not. Probably doesn't need it.
We're still getting into, like, maybe it's because I was lucky, but yeah, and on BioShock Infinite, or most of the games I worked on, the lion's share of what the programmers were doing was isolating times when we had content problems, and then most of the fixes from, like, the biggest wins were always in, like, the dumb shit like that, fixing your content to not have like 4K textures a million miles away and that sort of thing, right?
Yeah, and I have a lot of opinions about that, but let me tell you, like, a really good example of when it was totally the fault of the programmer. I mean, whether you can really blame them or not, whatever. But so before I worked at Disbelief, I was a graphics dev support engineer at Sony, and I got flown out to Edmonton to go check out what was going on BioShock knows. BioWare. I got to go see what was going on with Dragon Age Inquisition, because they were getting, like, horrific frame rates in this one level. Have you guys played God damn, I keep saying that. Dragon Age Inquisition?
Yes.
Okay, so the Hinterlands level, it has all the trees and stuff. So they were getting, like, really bad frame rates on that level in particular, and they couldn't figure out why. So one of my friends, I talking to him, and we're like, okay, we should probably fly you out here so you can like look at our frame in person and see what the fuck is going on. So I went out there and like we were kind of going through the profile, and this is an example of like why consoles are amazing. So we got some captures. We were looking at the frame. We were like, huh, okay, nothing looks immediately suspect, but I was like, why don't we try turning off some stuff? So we tried disabling like particles, tried disabling some other stuff. I was like, why don't we try disabling foliage? So when we did that, it's like suddenly, oh wow, okay, that was way worse than it should be. So it was this really little known and ill documented setting in shader code that you had to turn on. It's really convoluted and I won't even try to explain it, but basically with foliage like leaves and stuff, it's like you have a cutout, so you have like a plane and there's an alpha channel where it's like see-through and there's parts that it's not see-through. That turns out it's kind of complicated to do in shaders and not lose a ton of performance. So we tweaked this one setting to get the hardware to basically use the hardware right for these shaders, and suddenly we went from we got 15 milliseconds back. We went from 23 frames per second to 30 frames per second.
Yeah, every now and then you comment out a line of code and you save like half your frame. It's
yeah, and it was like these are really smart people. Like this was partially like it was not well documented, and partially it was just like kind of convoluted and weird. But so it's not always content. Sometimes it's just the code being bad for whatever reason.
Yeah, that wasn't what I was getting at. I was trying to get you to justify my bullshit with because I'm using a.
And now the purpose of this entire show becomes clear.
It's true. Yeah, I mean, we were talking about blueprint scripting last night and visual scripting languages in general, and like if they have a future and how cool it is, and the fact that I'm making a fucking game entirely in blueprint right now, to the chagrin of Scott.
Oh my god, yeah, that was kind of funny watching you guys but be like, it's great versus it's not great. It's like, guys, okay. So my problem with Blueprint is, it's not that, like, I think the freedom to be able to do what you want as a designer is good. I think that's fine. My problem is more about, like, the tools involved with debugging it as a programmer. Because it is basically running code. Like there is an interpreter in the engine that is running code that is Blueprint. But the thing is that the workflow, I think this is the main thing, is it's a user experience issue. If you want to figure out what is going on with Blueprint and you're in code, like as a programmer, what you want to do is you want to just step into the debugger and look line by line, because that's just how our workflow is. You can't do that. So what you have to do is you have to open up the editor and go into Blueprint. It's like a totally different workflow, and you can't really, it's not as easy to just see what it's doing while it's active.
But I mean, I would say most of the projects you work on are large studios, right? Like you work in large studios, and it's pretty common at a large studio if you're a designer or somebody and you have a problem and you realize the problem's in code, you go to a programmer and you say, hey, the problem's in code, and then they have to fix it. Why isn't the opposite true? Like, why can't you go to be like, oh, the problem's in Blueprint, and then leave it to a designer? Do you feel like you just have to take? I know Disbelief can't because you guys, like you're gonna fix it. But I would argue that should just be the way it is. Like if we're gonna, like, I'm as helpless. Yes, I could open Visual Studio, but I'm not gonna fucking open Visual Studio if there's a problem. I'm gonna go to a programmer if I'm at a large studio and I'd be like, I think something's wrong here-ish, right?
Yeah, so I think part of that is probably like we can't just roll up to a designer's desk and be like, what did you do here? Because we work with remote studios.
Yeah.
And we don't always have access to, who it is who wrote that. But, part of it also just, you can't diff content. And I think a lot of the time, if we could just diff content, it would make our lives so much easier.
Yeah.
Because most of the time, we do like perforce archaeology. Like if we know that there's a change list, we have some code changes we know was fine, and then something broke, and we're like, okay, well, let's trace back what like who checked in what the changed in the code, and we're like, oh, okay, I see what happened, then we can just fix it.
Of course.
With Blueprint, people check that in, and you can't diff it without loading it up and looking at it in the editor, and then like you can't really compare it side by side unless you have like 2 versions of the engine running.
Isn't there isn't there some kind of differ? Like there's a way to diff Blueprint. I've never used it. We had a bad time trying to use it once.
So I heard Steve mention that last night. Apparently it corrupts your original files. So I would hesitate to use such a tool.
Yeah. I would be terrified. I heard that you can merge Blueprint. Like there's some experimental way to merge it, and I'm like, I'm gonna wait for that to be very well tested. Like that, I will say that it's the downside of visual scripting languages, right?
Yeah.
Is that it's got all this extra data. I would say, yeah, that's probably the biggest downside to visual scripting languages. I can see how that'd be a pain. I could definitely see how diffing would be useful.
I think if there was a way to basically see the underlying, text script and be able to diff that would be really helpful. Because I think it was like, action scripts in Flash or whatever. You could do stuff in the like visual editor, then you could actually look at your action script code, and if you knew what you were doing, just edit the code. But you had a way to diff it, which you don't have a way to do that. And I think that's actually a lot of problems that we see with content too, is there are no diff tools really. Like you can't diff a U asset or a U level, which sucks because then you get artists where it's like final version, final version. Or change some stuff. It's like, thanks, I don't know what you changed, but now the frame
life,
runs
Elizabeth.
10 milliseconds slower. Please fix it.
Just hit a little close to home there, Elizabeth.
Hey, it's not your fault. It's because the tools suck.
I love Unreal. I haven't had anything better. That's the problem, right? Like there is nothing better.
Now the truth comes out.
Like there's.
She had nothing better. She loves it, but until something else comes along.
Well, I think
there won't be.
We were talking about this a little bit last night. We were like, or I was asking you, okay, you think that the animation tools in Unreal are like the best in the industry, and maybe that's true.
Maybe Frostbite.
There's probably stuff about it that pisses you off that could be better.
I plead the fifth. No, well, I mean,
what one's the
really
fifth? What's the fifth one?
In America, when you're guilty in court, you have the right to not incriminate yourself by saying I plead the fifth.
And that's an amendment? All right, okay,
yes.
Cool.
Anyway, no, I think most of my problems, I do have problems, of course. I think most of my problems come down to the tick rate being separate between the animation blueprint and the actual, what do you call it? You actually probably know this better than me. You know how
the
like
animation thread?
Yeah. Like the tick rate being
insane.
Different is really painful sometimes. And the I would argue, but again, like this is stuff like if you're deep in the guts, every now and then. Shut up, I love Ascension. But yeah, I think that's probably not ideal. And I think what else? In general, I think there's a lot of different ways to do the same thing. Personally, I would prefer it if it's no big deal. I just ignore the stuff I don't like. I never use anim montages, for instance. But I think the engine might be. I'm on the fence about that. The engine might be stronger if a lot of that stuff didn't exist. I would prefer it if all studios had to do things the same way, mostly using the animation blueprint system and the animation tree system, rather than relying on the montages and the other kind of half-step tools. It would make it easier for us to debug each other's stuff if you have to jump into somebody else's project. I think that would be maybe a complaint. Would be that there's a lot of different ways to do the same thing. But I'll say from a workflow standpoint, I have not seen anything as powerful. Like it is incredibly powerful. Especially now that you have the new skeletal control stuff, and that where you can put a skeletal control in a specific part of the tree, for instance, is insanely powerful. The ability, all the stuff to drive textures and blend shapes based on pose stuff. Like Elizabeth, this is a beautiful fucking system. I love it. We're at a place right now where I can't take on another pet project, but a pet project I would take on would be just rigging a character entirely in Unreal, because I think you can. I don't think you need to export bones anymore. I think you can do. There's so many procedural tools. I'm a rigger by trade initially, right? So I know how to rig a character, and I'm pretty sure I could, using the math libraries and Unreal and everything, I think I could like recreate a rig and a skeletal system in Unreal. The problem is that like at the end of the day, there's really no reason to do. I mean, you get a couple of wins if you have like if your twist joints are procedural rather than baked out to bones, then they'll work on your ragdolls. Like it could do some cool stuff here and there, but I don't know. Like I think I don't know where I'm going with that. So like it's something you would do just it's something you would do just to do it, to be like I could.
Just to
But not
prove a
really-
point. There's no
not
real
practical.
advantage to it. Like
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff like that that's really like fun side projects that are like, oh, I bet I could fucking do this. And then you do it and you're like, oh, that's a cool tech demo, I guess. But like at the end of the day, this isn't gonna be useful in any way. Like in a shipping game, there's you want to do the simplest thing that gets you from that proves out your art style, your design, your whatever it is you're trying to do. You generally don't I would call that a solution in search of a problem when you start doing stuff like that, you know?
Yeah.
I agree, Gwen. I agree. That sounds like a profound waste of time.
Thank you.
No
Thank
problem.
you, Chris Slate. Thanks for putting up with us today, Chris Slate. I know like this is not fun for you. I'm sorry.
No, there's definitely a lot of shit in there, like that you've explained, actually, Elizabeth. That's just like the milliseconds to rendering a frame. I didn't know about that, and that sort of stuff's genuinely interesting. Like how the actual this is the stuff I want to know, and because Gwen uses that one where you just draw lines to the thing. I mean, she has no idea, so I want to learn the nuts and bolts. So it's some interesting stuff.
I like it when you call Blueprint drawing lines to the thing.
That's because I don't know what it is. I just watch
That's
Gwen
fine.
because Gwen streams her development, so that's my entire frame of reference. I'm like, there's these boxes with lines. I guess that's how you make games now. That's all I know.
Yeah. Well,
You're not wrong.
it's an art. This goes back to a lot of like I personally love visual scripting languages. I think they're cool. I think they work really well if you're specifically me, like a small developer, don't want to open Visual Studio. I don't need to diff and merge things if I'm a solo developer. Maybe I might have to diff things later if I have like write it too much shit. But like for the most part, those tools are a lot more useful when you're debugging other people's stuff. Obviously, I don't need to merge because I'm a solo developer. And I think like we leaned heavily on Blueprint at the Molasses Flood, and there was times when I would argue you do change how you structure your content when you're a team working mostly in Blueprint. So like for the Flame and the Flood, we would go for having more .u assets rather than keeping everything in one, like keeping everything in the player controller in one asset, because if Damian has the player controller checked out, then I can't work if I'm doing something that's, that requires me to have the player controller checked out. Whereas if it was in code, you'd probably just write code and merge it. So it does change how you structure your data. That's true.
Right. Yeah. And like, I think that's kind of my main complaint about, I guess, Blueprint and how content is usually in general is because you can't diff it, you can't merge it.
Yes.
So only one person can work on it at a time.
Yeah.
Which sucks.
Unless you're like fucking weekend hero status, Elizabeth. No, I think I don't no obviously no major AAA company is using Blueprint exclusively or even as much as really.
Well, so I mean, not exclusively per se, or they do a lot of stuff. It depends on how many engineers they have, and that's often why like they wish they could have more engineers, but they can't.
But there's like 4 and the
Yeah.
entire industry has to fucking share them.
Exactly.
You keep Elizabeth in Boston for a couple years. Jesus.
So, like, they end up having a lot of stuff in Blueprint, which, eventually they have to nativize it. They have to turn it into C++ because once you get to a certain point of so much Blueprint, you start to get performance issues because at the end of the day, like, raw C++ is just going to be faster than interpreting a blueprint through the blueprint interpreter in Unreal.
Yeah. I mean, eventually. How long does that take? How many lines of code can I how many blueprint nodes do I get before I have problems, Elizabeth?
I mean, it depends. I don't know. Like, part of it is how much content you have and like like where are your milliseconds going? That's what it all comes down to. Like, whenever you talk about performance, it's like, where are your milliseconds going? Sometimes you just have those milliseconds because, like, say you're not super pushing the hardware graphically and you're not doing any complicated simulations and you know, you are easily hitting 60. So sure, yeah, you can spend the extra like 5 milliseconds on blueprint, you know, cumulatively, like whatever. Still hitting 60, who cares?
Yeah, especially if apparently you can just fix a bool in foliage and like save 20 milliseconds or some shit. So who cares? All blueprint all the way.
Exactly. Well, Elizabeth, thank you for being here. Thank you very much for being on the show. For people in the Twitch chat, the people not listening at home, we're going to stick around and answer a few questions if you have any. So if you have any, please prepare them. But for people listening at home, thank you very much. Elizabeth, where can people find you on the internet for those listening on their phones right now?
So I am on Twitter, Ice Tigress. I use that handle other places too, but Twitter's probably the best place to find me for like the good game dev content.
The good shit.
The good shit. Yeah.
All right. Well, this has been Elizabeth Baumel. Did I say your name right? Elizabeth Baumel, Chris Slight, and Gwen Frey, and you've been in the Dialogue Box.
All right, that, ladies and gentlemen, is the podcast portion of this. Yeah. Done.
Yeah. You're like our third guest. We've never done. I know. I don't know how this one's gonna play, Elizabeth. Like this was. I had a good time.
Yeah, it was fun. I've never like been on a podcast before. Like I've done shitty Twitch streaming a long time ago, but beyond that, I haven't like done anything like this before.
Yeah,
so,
dude.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course.
No problem at all.
Do you wanna are you you know we're like on Twitch, right? Did we tell you that or did we just creep you out? Do you want to answer questions from people?
Sure, yeah.
Are there questions? I assume Chris Light, have you been reading?
Yeah, I've been following the chat. There was a few, but they were all specific to things you were talking about at the time, so I'm gonna wait for people to ask.
I gotcha.
Bearded Outlaw asking what your favorite game glitch, and if I know it's old and it hasn't been spoken about, what are your thoughts on Alien Colonial Marines bug fix 5 years after the game's release? Or wasn't that like, because I read that story, it was like just changing one line of like some sort of code means that all the AI now actually kind of works as intended in Aliens Colonial Marines, and it took someone 5 years to figure out that it was like, oh, we just typed this one thing wrong, and that fucked up the thing.
And, I heard about it. I never had a chance to like sit down and read the article, but from what I understand, it was like a one character typo.
Yeah.
And either like that somehow adds like some default case that was bad, or there was like a different asset it pointed to, and the reason they just never found it was like it was a typo. And this is the worst thing. Like one character typos are the worst, especially when they're, you know, terms that you see elsewhere in the engine, which is why I'm like extremely picky about spell checking everything.
It's a one letter typo.
It's a one letter typo.
They spelt Teva wrong. That was it.
Yep. Yeah. I think
and that meant the AI was terrible in Aliens Colonial Marines. Like, I remember playing that when it came out, and it was like, oh no, why are the aliens so stupid? Like,
I think it was even it was like a config file, wasn't it? It was like an ini.
Yeah, it was an ini file.
Yeah.
Which makes me way suspicious too. Like we were talking about this at work, and I strongly suspect like these bugs are caught. Like they knew it. There was something else. Like either this was something that slipped in past content lock, and they were like, "Oh, changing this is too scary. We tested it. We don't see a difference." Or like, because I mean, it's not like it made the game that different, right? From what I understand, it made it fairly perceptibly different.
Well, no.
How big was the team, and like how experienced were they? Because I don't really know about this game except for the bug.
Well, yeah. I mean, it was. Aliens Colonial Marines is a whole thing. This made the AI in the game kind of work, so it didn't do insane things. Like there was a famous video at the time of like someone walking around a corner and there's an alien there basically looking like it's dancing. It's just stood next to a wall moving. Like, and there was plenty of that, like aliens just running towards walls for no, you were just like, well, off that goes. Like, it's not attacking me in any way. Like, it has no interest. this apparently kind of fixed things like that. The game's still not great, but that's a much wider issue. But yeah.
But I mean, there's so many things that go wrong here that it's like towards the end of in that scramble at the end of production, it was likely I don't know. It's hard to say.
Yeah, well, so some bugs, like, it was basically shippable, is what it sounds like. Like, it wasn't ideal, but it's probably not the highest priority bug, because, like, a crash is always going to take precedence, right? If you literally can't run the game, like, you got to fix that first. And then, I mean, I would say, like, the hierarchy of, like, bug priority is, you know, crashes, and then after that, like, performance issues that make the game, like, really shitty to play, and then after that, you have, like,
quality of life stuff.
Yeah, well, so I guess I would say, like, okay, crashes and game breaking bugs are probably the two top ones, and then you have the performance issues, and then you have, like, quality of life things where it's like, this isn't going to make or break the game, but we should really fix it.
And even the crash bugs, sometimes if you fix a bug, it introduces other bugs. You reach a point where no matter that, you let everything slide that you can. You let bugs through towards the end.
That vampire game that I mentioned's crashed on me 3 times on the PC port, which isn't terrible, but it's still more than a lot of games generally, like, just for seemingly no reason. Like, it's just, oh, there it goes. Goodbye.
Yeah, well, the other thing is you can't always crash, or you can't catch all crashes. Because, like, your QA team is going to be, like, you know, maximum 100+-ish people. I don't know. But, you know, you just have much bigger order of magnitude, you know, people QA testing it basically when you first launch a game. And, like, that's why patches are a thing, because you're not going to find certain crashes until you get into these really weird little situations.
Specific things,
and shit breaks.
I generally find you do, like, we find most of the bugs before they come out. Like, the vast majority of the bugs, the QA finds them. In my experience, what happens is you just don't fix them because you can't. Because the solution would require fundamentally rewriting something that would probably have a very high likelihood of introducing new bugs, or because there's the only you reach as you get closer and closer to launch, you just have to start letting things go because it's any change is a risk, right?
Yeah.
And you become so risk averse the closer you get to launch that even if you know the solutions, you let things through. That's yes, there will be things that the players find that you don't, but usually I mean,
it depends on
my
the scale of
experience,
the game.
It's more the opposite. Yeah.
And
again, your experience is mostly like fixing the bugs. Yeah, all right.
Wheeze202 pointing out that typos aren't a thing in Blueprint. And then he had a picture of a cat with shades
Wheeze
on.
is also doing he's another Twitch streamer that works entirely in Blueprint.
That's
sorry, go ahead.
True, but there are other problems with Blueprint. So
yeah, I constantly the for loop in Blueprint, like I have some kind of like brain problem where because everything else wire left to right, for the for loop you do all the logic off the loop and then you go back to the completed and then you pull off of that, and I always fuck that up. Like there's so many times I'll go back into something I've written previously and I'm like, why is this slow, or why is this shit? And it's always like, oh, because I've decided to run the thing that I'm supposed to do after the end of the loop every fucking loop. Like, I'm just doing that constantly. That's where I get that's like a personal problem though. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I could see how a typo could fuck you up in Blueprint. Like, if you just have a whole bunch of objects and they have similar names, one-off. But so that's one way. But there are issues that, like, so my boyfriend works on an Unreal game he's working at First Strike Games, and he was telling me this issue that he saw where it was like the animation blueprints to some characters or something, and they were just massive. Like, why do we have 100 bones attached to everything? And the problem was because the original, I guess, thing, someone copy and pasted like the original template they used as a template, and then it was referencing back to the original character. So every single blueprint made off of this copy and paste was referencing back to something totally unrelated just because it was copy and pasted. Like, you don't have that shit in like actual code.
I'm trying to figure out what the hell you're talking about. You copy and pasted. Are you talking about like the retargeting stuff? Or are you talking about?
I don't know I think it was something like that.
Yeah,
But it was something like there was a blueprint that was copied and pasted, and if it was referencing some characters like animation blueprint, I guess, and that tagged along for the ride every other time this blueprint got copied and pasted used as a template.
Well, there is such a thing as retargeting. If you retarget from one skeleton to another, and you don't know what you're doing, you can duplicate every animation in the game. That's a pretty common one. Every animation tied to that skeleton.
That sounds like that may have been what it was.
Yeah, and that becomes problematic very quickly. So just don't fuck up, Elizabeth, any one of these problems.
Solid advice from Gwen.
This is the problem when you have too many people doing blueprint. They don't know what they're doing. Yeah. No, that sounds like a really big problem they should probably fix with the interface.
No, I mean so the retargeting stuff is, I mean, it tells you it's going to duplicate your assets. It warns you that it'll do it. Not with like a pop-up, but it says it on the thing, like duplicate and retarget.
Well, maybe I should be a little bit more obvious.
There's two, it's the way you retarget different skull meshes in the same skeleton versus retargeting, like building a map between two different skeletons that have slightly different proportions, versus like the other retargeting system. I don't do this enough to know all the words. Like, I'm not using the right words for this, but there's...
I have not encountered these
two ways to do
before,
it.
So,
yeah.
Hefu pointed out that with Aliens Colonial Marines, it was 5 different studios involved in the development of it, and it was on and off for 6 years. So not super unexpected. There you go. Belly Arms ask if do you have any tips to run heavy async tasks in the background. I need to maintain 90 FPS. I'm guessing that's a VR thing. And I have a function that takes a couple arrays, does a bunch of math and outputs an array. This might as well just be code for me, but that takes over 11 milliseconds and causes hitches when I try updating the main thread. So, do you have any tips to run this heavy async task in the background?
So it's taking in... Sorry, is it taking in arrays and then spitting out a new array?
How am I going to take in? Takes in a couple of arrays, does a bunch of math, and outputs an array. So it sounds like it's taking in a few arrays and then outputting one. He just said yes. So there you go. Yeah.
Okay. Is it... are you making a new array every time? And is this Unreal?
These are the questions we need, Belly Arms.
Yeah, we need a lag. There's a lag before we can answer.
Okay.
Because there's like...
It's their milliseconds yet again.
Yes.
We're dealing with them, but via the internet and Twitch.
Someday we'll be dealing with this in our video games too, if the streaming console stuff is real.
That sounds pretty damn real. Microsoft seem to be super working on that right now. There's a bunch of stuff coming out.
Have you heard more than I have?
Just in terms of like leaked news stories and stuff. Yeah. Nothing concrete, but a lot. Yes, UE4 for loop on the arrays and builds an array as it loops.
Okay. So allocation is slow. So I would try to limit making new arrays like very, very often. If you could have like either a placeholder array or just like if you can limit the amount of times you're making new allocations, that helps a lot. So I don't know what the exact math it is that you're doing, but like if you can have, you know, either like a pre-created results array or like I would need to like know more about what it is that you're exactly doing to make better suggestions. But rule of thumb, if you can just reuse a chunk of memory instead of making a new one and destroying it or whatever, like that'll be faster.
Boom. I hope that helps you, Belly Arms. Also, very fine name. El Wester says, ever started a project and felt you've used the wrong language or engine when already too far in? I know I haven't, so...
That's an interesting question. I think, personally, no. Well, a lot of times in AAA and in places like that, first off, you don't really have a lot of say over the there. If you are lucky enough to be on the team that's helping to pick the engine, even then you don't have a lot of say over which engine thing that will get you. Usually, it'll depend heavily on your funding situation. So certain engines, there'll be things. You'll either have the ability to buy an engine up front outright, or you'll have to go like funding is a factor, right? You might have factors based on your publisher, like your publisher might have a deal with Epic or with Unity or something, and so you'll be using some kind of you'll be told which engine to use. So you won't really. There's very rare that you really have a choice. Um, generally, what are their options? I don't know many people that roll their own tech, for instance, largely because given you're going to be making a game under some kind of time constraint. So you're going to have to get up and off the ground running pretty quickly. I know at when we were doing Marvel Heroes Online, we knew we didn't have time to write our own tech. We looked at CryEngine, Unreal, and at the engine that made Titan Quest, and we were evaluating between those three. And the Titan Quest weird one. Like this was literally like a guy still had a laptop. Like the company that made Titan Quest, I don't know if they folded or what the deal is, but all the code was like on one dude's laptop and he like wouldn't let us see it. He flew out to California from Maine or some shit and like showed us the engineers were allowed to evaluate for 2 days while he was in the room leering at them or something on his laptop. We didn't go with that one. We went with
Sounds
Unreal.
great.
Yeah. Because that was weird. But what I'm saying is like you generally don't have a choice in that instance. And I'd say we didn't really have a choice at the Molasses Flood either, because I mean we all knew Unreal. You go with what you know, you have so much time. Generally what's familiar will be what's the most useful. Also in general, if you're doing something commercial, if you're doing something commercial, there's going to be a lot of constraints. And you are probably going to do something that plays to your strengths. So you're probably going to make a game that works for the engine that you already know pretty well, for instance. That's a pretty common tack. If you're doing something for fun at home, you're probably excited about learning new tech or there's very clear lines for the most part between which engine to use for certain things. Like if you're making the kind of game that would do well in Twine, you probably know you're probably not going to use the Unreal Engine. If you're making the jury's out on, like if I was making a 2D game, I probably wouldn't use Unreal Engine versus if I was making a highly cinematic 3D game, obviously I would use the Unreal Engine. I guess so. No, I haven't had that situation. I'm having a really hard time even imagining that situation. It sounds like I'm muted sometimes for half a second.
It's just a Discord video chat thing. It's gonna happen every now and again. Sorry about that, Ray.
My bad. Yeah, we're trying a new thing with Discord rather than Skype.
I've got a lot going through a lot of different things through to the internet, and then you see it, so it drops off every now and again. But yeah,
okay,
that's not a problem. Wheeze202 has a question. My question is most likely just a yes or no question. Solid question, but I'll ask it anyway. Are Elizabeth's criticisms of UE4 mainly focused on low-level engine development? And then he seems to have lots more questions around that. I don't know whether we'll ask them all at once. Does Elizabeth have experience working inside the actual engine? My assumption is that Gwen's admiration of the engine is from the perspective of someone who uses the engine, whereas Elizabeth's criticisms is of the engine code itself. Am I correct?
Not exactly.
It wasn't yes or no.
I mostly live in engine code. Yeah, like I have most of my experiences down in the engine guts in the C++ code. A lot of I have criticisms of the engine code itself. I have criticisms of the editor. Like.
Oh, do you want to go there? We should have talked about that. That's more my domain. Shit.
I mean,
what do you think?
More of my issue is, like, I would say my main criticisms, other than, like, it's hard to say what my main ones are, because I have criticisms of the code. Like, there are parts of the code that are just, like, a huge clusterfuck. But then I also have criticisms of the tools, because, like, a lot of the problems that I talked about were just because, like, I can't diff blueprints or
Yeah.
shader graph code or
Yeah, but the material system is like phenomenal, worlds above anything you give in Unity or any other engine I've seen. And the animation system, the visual scripting language, like these are very powerful tools. I've not seen another engine with powerful. I think the one thing they do extraordinarily well is the art tool. I mean, the and to be fair, like Blueprint is phenomenal. Like it's an achievement. It's I don't want to look at C plus or C sharp. Like C sharp makes me sad. Like
see, there's
I remember C sharp. I mean I don't. I blocked that time out of my mind because it was terrible. Like
I don't know. I mean, part of it depends on what you're used to, right? Like I'm used to working in code, so I would much prefer to use C sharp to dealing with Blueprint. But it's all it's A, what you're used to, and B, what you're trying to achieve, I think. So if you're trying to like bang out a lot of really quick prototype things and you're a designer, like Blueprint is for you. Do it. Cool. If you're a programmer and you're trying to get a lot of performance out, then Blueprint's gonna suck for you. If you're working on a big team, it's gonna suck a lot more also.
Well, the other argument I would say is if you're trying to bootstrap a business, right? Like you can programmers are expensive. You may not have them on your team, but what you can do is put together a compelling prototype. And when you're pitching to publishers, and especially if you're pitching to VC or someone like that, what they mostly want to see is something very, very pretty that conveys a concept or an idea. And so what you can do is you can go and you can put together something real, and then you can go out and get like funding, and then you can hire programmers, and then you can make it for real. But like you can't do it the other way around. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think
like you can't show your code to a venture capitalist. They don't do it.
Right. I think we're also talking about very different stages in development because you're talking about like early, like pre-pro, like trying to get funding stages, and I'm talking closer to the end, like shipping.
Yeah, that's true too. Yeah.
So like, I mean, your code, you can have all kinds of horrific shit under the hood when all you're gonna have is a prototype demo that may not ever get off the ground. But when you're getting closer to like shipping, that stuff, has been festering for 2 or 3 years, and it's like you kind of, I guess that's the point at which it's like you really need better tools for the programmers to deal with the content, I guess is what I'm saying.
The flame and the flood festered all the way onto the Switch, the PS4, and the Xbox One. So festering right into our bank account, Elizabeth. And that was like, don't get me wrong, like we did have 2 engineers cleaning up a lot of our shit, so I'll shut the hell up. But like,
well, I mean, you're a smaller team, and you did not. I mean, it's different when you're working on a project that's like 60 or 100 plus people, and it's like,
God,
you've got 20 artists and designers checking things and like updated the blueprint in their change list. It's like, thanks, that tells me nothing.
Yeah, that's a difference.
And they're in a different time zone, and you might not have access to the Slack they live in. And so it's just like,
yeah, that's a different situation. I actually am terrified. Like, I would love to go like if I could have UE4 at Irrational just to see what it would have been like, or work at like a AAA studio now that's using UE4, because you have too much power, like too much in reality for a large studio. Like, it's great if you're a small team or a solo dev, but like I know how to make an unfindable bug. Like I know, like I can put some shit in a component, put it on a static mesh and drop it in a level like a nuke. Like I know how to, you can fuck the team if you know what you're doing with
it's funny you say that, because I've heard of people doing this intentionally, like hiding a super high density mesh or something like under the floor in a level so that everyone's like, oh my god, we're trying to hit right, and then they take it away later.
That used to be
now we're hitting right.
Every graphics programmer swears that they don't do that, and they do. Like they do. They allocate like 10% dumb shit, like, and then at the end of the project, after the artists have like cried and we can't get any more blood from the stone, they just fucking unlock it. I don't think Anakini did that, but though now that I think about it, that magical fucking animation bug, like I would respect him. I wish that was actually the case, like that it was like planned rather
I'll
than
have to
like
ask him in GDC because I'm really curious about what this was now. But
yeah.
yeah, I mean, there is a certain degree of like, in a way, like artists are, you know, a gas in that, and I'm not saying this in a bad way. It's like it fills the space that it's given, right? So if you just cordon off a little bit so that they can't get the last 10% when like you need to have some buffer, right? So that you
Yeah.
can actually optimize everything. Because if you give them like the entire amount of budget and they fill it, and then suddenly you have to decide to start cutting there, it's like, well, we've had it, it's perfect. Now we have to start cutting things that we don't really want to cut. It's better to have like a little bit of buffer so that you can be like, beforehand and like cut things preemptively, and then by the end it's like, okay, we're not freaking out.
Yeah. This is why I'm gonna do one more project on a large team before I die, I think, because I do miss some of that stuff. Like I miss the large team dynamics and the I don't know how to explain it. Like when you have that one designer that's like a little too creative, that can figure out how to make them the thing with 500 fucking raycasts to pull off something that's just so cool and drops in the level, and then you have to find it later. Or the artist that what was one? I think I've said this before, but in Bioshock Infinite, you know how you have that statue that's really far away in the distance, and it's got like thousands and thousands of polygons on it and shit. Like somebody just scaled down 20 of those and put them in a basket for like this little shop area. And you'd walk in there and it was just like frame drop. Or like, I don't know.
They just shrunk the really complicated thing and was like, oh, well, we need a statue of it. There it is. Whoop, done.
Well,
this is not the first time I've heard of this happening.
You have one day to make a gift shop. You open the editor. You're not paying attention.
Small.
You do what you got to do. Like, or you know, like not everybody's super experienced. You have all kinds of experience levels. These things slip by. You can't. The person, your lead is going to go look at the level and do like a quick sanity check, but they're not going to catch everything. This is the same thing. Like, technically, yeah, you could demand that every lead has to look at everything that somebody under them does. You could demand that like there has to be a code review for every check-in and shit. But like when the rubber hits the road, what's a good example? When we were hitting towards the end of crunch, they wanted to make sure they instituted a policy of like at Irrational, I think the coders had to have 2 code reviews or something like that. Also, I believe the any change they submitted was automatically diffed and sent off to a mailing list, so all the other programmers could just creep on it if they wanted to. And I know on the art team, we had we didn't have Blueprint back then, it was Kismet. We had a Kismet check that we had to do, which was just like I would go, Carson and I were each other's like buddy checks, and we just like, it's like, hey Carson, I'm checking in now. You approved it. He was like, all right. Like we didn't give a fuck, which is maybe, you know, like fun. But we didn't introduce bugs. So
I mean,
we were great, like, so you know it was fun.
We do code reviews for every check-in, and we do have we have this thing called a review hub where we can see everybody's check-ins. And
I know you do, because the people I'm talking about that implemented that at Irrational started Disbelief, so I'm sure they have the same fucking thing. Yeah,
I mean, it's good though because you catch bugs. Like I've definitely seen it a few times. I've caught other people's. I've had mine caught. You know, you look at a check-in and you're like, wait a second.
I feel like I'd be right. So all I've ever written have been like tools for artists. So nothing I write ever gets checked. Like nobody gives a fuck about the like stupid art tools that don't like extensions to Maya or some shit. Like doesn't matter, right? But I would be furious if like well, partly because I'm bad at this. I'm like, it doesn't matter if it could be more optimal. It's a tool like that'll be used maybe 4 times between now and ship, and if it's used more, then I'll come back and I'll fix it. Like
I mean, grumble. So there are a couple things that I think would prevent this. Like, let's scale it on the cinematic model and just drop it in. First of all, just like have LODs, and like everyone needs to understand what a level of detail, like there's a level of detail scale. Please use this.
Well, in the artist's defense, if you're making something that's only ever supposed to be used once, like you don't imagine every imaginable use case. when you make something.
Yes, but there are tools to give you, like,
You can
there's Simply Gone, right? Like
yeah.
you can, and it might not be optimal, but for like a gift shop little model, like you could probably use Simply Gone.
They they could have. That was just an example. Like some people fuck up. Like when you're in that.
I've heard of this though. Like in Mass Effect 2, the same problem. Like someone scaled down the cinematic model of the Norman and put it in the display case in Shepard's cabin. Like it's the same problem.
When you're like, you have these days, like towards the end of crunch, it's hard to describe the feeling of you go in and you have a list, and every day you get 10 things off the list, and there's 20 on the list, and you have, and some of it is important, and you have these producers, and all they care is that the number goes down, but some of the bugs are really important, but way harder, and will take a long time. And then there's fixing something, and there's fixing right, and you don't always have, like, you are under a lot of pressure to fix a lot of things very quickly, and so maybe you don't do the thorough fucking thing you could have done, and maybe that's okay, but maybe this time it's not okay, but that's all right, because QA will check it, and you have hundreds of QA that are going around the clock, because, you know, you're a global company, and you have this shit going on, right? And then, where was I even going with this? And then you got, oh god, and then you got the fact that, like, the QA testers are paid by the bug. So, like, somebody from, if there's a bug in a core system, rather than, you know, like your house in India or China or wherever is doing your QA, rather than say, hey, there seems to be something globally wrong with hats, they'll drop 80 bugs on you that is like, there's something wrong with this hat, there's something wrong with this hat, there's something wrong with this hat, and then you have to, like, spend a day being like, fucking, like, I would go out of my way to dupe a bug so that they don't get paid for those, to be like, this is a dupe of this and this and this and this, and they would, like, oh my god, like, the this is just like a part of, like, the stress and the bullshit that happens towards the end of a project, you know. And I don't like, if somebody fucking scaled down the statue, like, I've just been there, I'm like, you know what, they rewrote that fucking scene after content. I had to add a fucking gift shop after content lock. I've got negative 24 hours to make this happen. I can totally understand how that would happen. Like, I get it.
Yeah, I mean, at that point, it's not the artist's fault. That's management. Like, that, you shouldn't, like, no one should be put in that situation.
Laying it down.
That's ridiculous.
Well, it happened, but it happens every project. Like,
I know, project. And that's part of why. That's another reason why, like, disbelief is a thing, is because, like, we don't crunch, because the thought is, like, instead of, you know, staffing up, working everybody to the bone, and laying people off, it's like, just hire us, we'll unfuck your shit early on, do it bright the first time.
Yeah. But you work with people.
I mean, that's just like a fucked up way to live, right? It's like,
yeah. But you actually, because you come on at the end of the projects, you usually work with people when they're crunching the most, right?
Well, we don't always, actually. So there's a certain point at which, like, it is too late. Like, we don't come at the very end of projects. Like, someone's like, oh, be on our game for, like, weeks to get it to ship. It's like, buddy, you should have called us 6 months ago, because like, yeah, we're not gonna do, like, quick fixes for your game, because that's a recipe for disaster. You know, because, you know, the idea is, like, you fix it right the first time, and then you don't have to deal with this shit later on, but you have to plan ahead for that. So
yeah.
Quick Flint pointed out that it's still fun. The best part is complaining about it after the fact. So I would imagine the complaining at the end of a project, which I know you've been working on something for a long time, having the sitting around and being like, I'll tell you what was bullshit about this. That can be a lot of fun.
My dude, I like complaining about it throughout the project.
I was just to say, I've been to that bar. I know. You know what goes on at Disbelief.
It's like, roll up, have like half a drink, be like, you would not believe the shit I have seen today.
Oh man, that's why I fucking love those guys, because we were the same way back at around. Oh man, nothing changes. It's best.
And it's funny because it sounds like, oh, my life is horrible. No, we're just having fun.
Yeah.
Look at this shit I saw today.
Well, that's one of the. I think you get to be there. You get to see a large number of projects, right? Because you're contracted to a lot of different studios, so you get to see how a lot of different people do things differently. You never have to crunch, because they're paying you, I like, kind of by the person, by the hour. They hire out. I know some of your contracts are structured so that they want a specific person. They're like, we want specifically Anakini, or we want specifically Elizabeth, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, you're kind of like a collective of engine programmers.
Yeah.
Yeah. What Elmore does is weird and cool.
Yeah, I don't even know all the business details, but yeah, it's basically like that. Like they'll want, we need 4 engineers, but a couple of people, like Anakini or whatever.
Yeah.
And like I got extended on one project because I had been on it, I guess, for a while, and they were like, no, we want to keep. We just want you.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's cool. Belly Arms asked what your company is and if you take on small indie jobs. You're getting work through this, Elizabeth.
So Disbelief is hiring programmers. If you're an engine programmer and you are to live or move to Boston or Chicago, then hit us up.
Boston would be the better of the two. Just heads up. Way more fun. Like, way more fun.
It's a nice place.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, unless there are any other pressing questions that anyone has right now, I might wrap things here, if you're fine with that.
Oh, wait. You seem to avoid code a lot. Do you use tools from Maya and UE4 to have a faster workflow? Yeah, Root Lancer, I definitely do. Absolutely. In fact, I started a YouTube thing at one point about some of my tools. Most of my tools I wrote a long ass time ago, though. And I maintain them. I have a tool chain I use for all the projects I work on.
What's your YouTube, quickly? What's your YouTube?
Oh, Gwen Frey the TA.
There you go. How did Elizabeth and Gwen get to know one another? Us Pro Puke, sorry.
So I get that right for you. Room?
No, you like
Gwen was on the floor.
It was like my first week at Disbelief, or we weren't called that back then, but you were like, hi, and you were like, Elmer told me there was a lady programmer here. Yes, hi.
Look, I have very few female friends, all right, and I've learned over the years to hunt them.
Someone tells me there is a woman in here. Bursts Gwen through the door.
Elmer hired a lady? Well,
yes.
To be fair, there's one female game developer in Boston, and she's gone now.
Oh, I thought you were going to say, and she's Gwen. Yeah.
No, I'm not a programmer.
God damn.
I don't even play one on TV. There was one.
One day I'll come back.
One day. We'll give a talk together.
Yeah.
Fuck yeah.
Sounds like the way of the future.
All right. Should we wrap this up then?
I think so. Elizabeth, thank you for coming on and doing this with us. It's
yeah, thank you for having me.
No problem. It's been a lot of fun. And thank you for sitting here and talking for a long time. Numbat Ninja enjoyed the show, everyone. Thanks. And he threw 30 cents at you, Gwen. So you've done well. This was fun. Thanks for the stream. No problem, guys. Thank you very much. It's mostly me, but thank you. Hold your applause.
I would like to give a shout out to Chris Slight for putting up with our bullshit today. We usually usually he gets to have fun. Today he only worked.
It's fine. And there's a lot of interesting shit, as I said. We'll have to get you back, Elizabeth, in a few months' time when the road
and then we will do the
solid
traveled. Unity v Unreal postmortem. I'm curious about.
Yeah, I would love to come back and throw all the new shit I have seen.
Yeah. Cool. Well, guys, we will be back next week. The episode, if you've come in halfway, will appear on iTunes on Friday, as it always does. The full video will be both here and on Gwen's YouTube that she mentioned earlier. Elizabeth's Twitter is actually on the screen, so we don't need to read anything out. Same with mine, same with Gwen's. And thanks for being here, guys. We will see you all soon.
This has been Gwen Frey, Elizabeth Baumel, and Chris Slight, and you've been in the Dialogue Box.
Bye.